Hey, welcome to episode 60 of the PoddyC. This week, we've killed Max and replaced him with Hopeful. Welcome to the podcast. Have we had you on the show before? I feel like I've talked to you recently, but it might have been just after the MDI.
Yeah, I think after the MDI.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, sure. My name is Hopeful, obviously. I play Mage for Echo, previously played Mandatory for the last MDI and the last TGP before that. Before I was in Echo, I was in Instant Dollars. Before that, it was a random guild, but yeah, that's about it.
Hell yeah. So this week we've got you on. Obviously, we're not going to spill any secrets about Race World First that are coming up because, you know, everybody's locked down the information for that. Although I will say I've heard Mage is looking pretty good, so it should hopefully be an exciting tier for you. But obviously,
I mean, I hope so.
Yeah. We'll see how it all turns out. There has been some class balance recently that is going to affect M plus a lot, so we could maybe start there with the brutal killing of Augmentation Evoker in the streets. I don't know if you guys saw this.
I was hearing about that. I heard Alex complaining already.
Yeah, closest clutchmates got. So okay, for the story for anybody who hasn't been following along this beta cycle, they nerfed it so that it doesn't affect tanks and healers anymore. It just affects everybody else. And then they were like, okay, well, in M+, obviously now it's only buffing 2 people instead of 4. So we're going to bring back that old passive where it's stronger in non-rage, right, in smaller groups. And they made that come in at 25% more powerful Ebonmites and Breaths of Eons and stuff. They nerfed that back down to just 10%. So you literally are only buffing 2 people, and it's only 10% stronger than in Raid when you're buffing 4 people. And they nerfed a bunch of other stuff about the AUG kit as well. They nerfed like how much damage Breath of Eons does, and yeah, that spec looks dead as hell for M+, which I'm personally so excited. I don't know about you guys, but I'm looking forward to a season without AUG, hopefully.
Oh, I'm so excited. It's been meta in every single comp since it came out, I think, in M+. Every single, meta comp.
Yeah,
that's crazy, too, because I remember there's been many seasons where we talk about, this might be the season where AUG is actually dead for good. And that happened, I mean, how many patches has it been now?
So
5,
4
6?
or 3. There's been
4?
3 real seasons with AUG, right? And then the Awakened season, so
okay, yeah.
Kind of 4 seasons with AUG, and I think of the top 2,000 keys, 500 from each season, AUG is in something like 1,800 of them or something like that. It's a crazy amount in total.
Yeah, in you guys' interview with Skarzard, you guys actually talked a little bit about. Wait, no, actually, no, it was not you guys.
Yeah, I think it was,
it was a different interview, actually.
What,
yeah. They're right. Yeah, where they talked about how they've liked the idea of having an AUG, and it's like something that's similar to a healer, but not necessarily a healer.
Yeah,
it seems like they've been a fan of AUG, and maybe it's just been too long now, and people have been complaining too much. They finally have to knock them down a notch.
I mean, you're definitely right that we do say, "Oh, this is the season where they're killing AUG," or where maybe we don't play AUG, right? I feel like we have said that going into Dragonflight Season 3 and then going into War Within, and it's not been true yet. So, but I do think I think it's just going to be nice. I've enjoyed, I played AUG to title in one of those seasons, and it is kind of a cool play style, but it was just so good every single one of those seasons, right? Where and it felt so bad to not be playing with an AUG in your group. You know, if you ever try and zone in without an AUG and you're just oh man, this is awful.
It's so nice having AUG because for the last 3 seasons, you just had someone just do all the healer jobs basically.
That's so
and now true. I mean, I'm kind of happy AUG is finally no longer meta, but now you're gonna have to DPS are gonna have to step up and start doing more stops and just everything the AUG was doing.
Nah, yeah. I would say we got to bring back healer jobs. It's been a while. I mean, you guys remember when all these jobs, having to go start RP, having to do all your CCs, and having to do all these little jobs used to be called the healer job, but Augmentation took that job for the past 4 patches, and we got to bring that back.
It used to be, there was the season where it was Moonkin work as well. Do you guys remember? It was in Shadowlands when prop pallies were or holy pallies were doing Ashen Hollow and doing more damage than the Moonkin, and the Moonkin had to do the jobs. That was a good season. Yeah. okay, there has been some other happenings as well. So there were some other balance changes in there. But I think the one thing that you guys brought up that is also interesting is there's been a series of developer interviews, including me and Max had one with Skarzard, and then Raider.io had one with like Morgan Day and Katrina Yepes. I'm not sure if that's the pronunciation. I only read the summary of that one. But that one was like a M plus one focused one, which is pretty cool. And Raider.io like did a big write up on it. So that was good to see. Kind of some interesting stuff. Was there anything in any of the interviews that have come out recently that you guys thought was particularly interesting?
Have you seen a Hopeful?
The Raider one, I saw like half of it, but not too much. I saw the Skarzard one.
Yeah, Skarzard one was
Yeah,
sick.
I was watching it too. Yeah, Skarzard was awesome to have. If we could have it on PoddyC, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, we're
yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure everyone's a fan of Skarzard.
Mm-hmm.
The PoddyC crew has been.
Chat was loving him.
The lore behind it was like we've been trying to get him on PoddyC for a year or something. Like since we started the podcast, actually since before we started the
pretty
podcast.
much since the beginning.
Yeah, we've been trying to because like he's like buddies with me and Max to some extent. So we've been.
Yeah, in fact, that was the only reason we started PoddyC. It was specifically to get Blizzard to somehow get one of these guys on.
And what ended up getting approved was just a 30-minute, 2-on-1 interview thing, which was also great. But hopefully, it's the success of that interview will mean they'll let him do a full podcast episode or something in a future season. Because I thought that was super interesting. The M plus one though was also super interesting because the Skarzard one was like because he has a tendency to give long answers. We didn't actually get that many questions in, which was great. I mean, his answers were really interesting, but the Raider.io one got a full 10 questions in, which some of the things like they talked about how the Squirrel MC thing, which anybody who's been following or who hasn't been following along, they took that out of Mechagon for this season, which is pretty hype.
Thank God.
And they explained a little bit of their thought process there and shifting the difficulty, like in Theater of Pain, having a different part be difficult, having different parts be the hard part than when it was last a dungeon, which it was definitely an interesting look at things.
Yeah, I would have liked to hear Skarzard talk about Valor Stones. That would have been really interesting because
you're not the only one who. Yeah,
he probably would have given like a really good explanation of like why exactly they came up with that whole system. But there was one thing that actually was interesting that Skarzard said. Like, what if they just buffed the boss? Or like, because we were talking about you guys were talking about the difficulty curve, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, maybe not nerfing Ovanax or Kaiveza was the right move, and maybe it was better to just like have harder previous bosses. And in my mind, that was like, sounded kind of wild because I'm just expecting like, so what if this means that instead of just one-shotting the first 4 bosses, it became doing first boss, it's still probably like one shot, and then second boss probably like 5-10 pulls, third boss probably like 20-30, and then fourth boss Rashanon probably like 40-50. Like that would be crazy, right? So I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
I personally like harder early bosses because it feels so weird how they just force to do the current tuning where like the first couple they want to be easy, and then by the 5th boss in the raid it's supposed to get hard, but the 4th to 5th boss jump is just crazy. Like this tier at least, Rashanon was like 1 pull, and then Brute Twister felt like an actual boss. It was like 80 pulls or something crazy. They actually had to like make a raid comp towards a lot of guilds were at the same, like were on Brute Twister when the Race to World First guilds were on Brute Twister. I think something like that's not ideal, but I would like it like Rashanon or Sigrid were a little harder. Like,
that. I agree. So first of all, like Rashanon and Sikran they're not necessarily 1 pull boss. Like there are a lot of guilds that wipe on the early bosses as well. That those are the guilds that those bosses are for. But like even for those guilds, I do think it was a little bit. Again, it's like a combination of those bosses were too easy, and then Ovanax and Kaiveza were too hard, right? And like
yeah, exactly.
You could take down Ovanax and Kaiveza. First of all, like no matter what you're doing to Rashanon, Kaiveza in the state that it launched in was bad, right? Ovanax, the way the difficulty was delivered on that fight, where it was like super weak aura intensive, was also bad. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. But like, do you take down Ovanax and Brute Twister or Ovanax and Kaiveza by like 10%, or do you take them down by 20%? You take them down by 30%, right? And then like, do you bring up Rashnan and Sikran by a little bit as well? And if so, by how much, right? Like there are a lot of different right answers that involve, I think always involve some nerfing of Kaiveza and Ovanax, and then can involve some buffing of Sikran and Brood Twister as well. And I think should as well. I do think those should have been harder fights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I would say it's just really hard nowadays because of how little bosses we have for how many types of players that exist in the whole cutting edge space.
Yeah. Again, that's the problem with like the best guilds are getting better and better every tier, right? And like whereas the low end mythic guilds are not at the same pace. They're still getting better every tier, but not at the same rate. And new guilds are entering mythic that haven't played it before. Speaking of guild stuff, there's been some guild drama on Twitter recently, or on X rather, the Everything app.
Hell yeah! Wait, actually, before we get into that, Hopeful, there's been a lot of people that have been asking in my chat, especially during the MDI. They want to know what the drama was between you and your former team. Mandatory.
That's right.
I heard there was like major drama going on.
No drama whatsoever. Just first of all, because I think people actually started to believe you. I mean, I basically just left because with them now doing like the MDI and the TGP every single season, especially with the race, I mean, it was my first time doing like an actual race and actual prep. So going from the race world first, it ended. Great. I get a 1 to 2 week break, maybe. And then MDI practice starts. And then by the time MDI is over, we have maybe a month break. That's like, I mean, not even a month break. I know Mandatory was practicing even before, like even after like a week or two after MDI practice. Then you go straight into the TGP practice in the TGP. And now we're still prepping for the next race during the whole TGP. Like the people Mandatory were going through, like with the race in Echo and then like prepping for the race and TGP, it was crazy. I would have gone insane if I did all of that. That's basically why I left it. I think it's just way too much right now if you want to do the race and either MDI or TGP. I think like at a certain point, people are going to have to start choosing between the two.
Yeah. I think this season in particular, because there was like Christmas right in the middle, and that sort of pushed MDI earlier and TGP later, and like that made both of them encroach on the races on both sides. Made it like especially nasty. But yeah, I mean, you could basically be like a full-time PvE, you know, like exactly. No breaks, which playing Race to World, like playing at the level that you have to play at to play in Race to World first, I've always thought was sort of predicated on being able to chill for a month before and afterwards, because it's just so intensive when it actually is going on. So yeah, I think that's going to be something where we'll see whether there are people that can sustain that. I mean, for the longest time, Echo sustained that among their MDI team, also being on the raid team and like playing a lot for the MDI team. Although I guess even then they still took breaks and just came in and like a month before the MDI started blasting.
Yeah, well, also back then it's not like a lot of prep was gone into either compared to now. It's like now it's every second you can, you're basically in a dungeon or in a raid, like prepping for the next thing, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So no drama between you and Mandatory?
Going back into...
No drama.
Okay. Man, no, I mean, I heard there was going to be like a boxing match or some like crazy shit going down when you guys meet up over at the Echo facility.
Oh, I'm always down for a boxing match.
Always down, okay. So going back into the JB drama.
Yeah, so this is the thing I was alluding to, which so JB tweeted that well, team, I found out tonight that I failed my 9-month trial in my new guild. Probably not enough time to find a new guild before this tier, so we might just take a break from WoW for a bit, maybe a long bit. And then he added on to this later with, for what it's worth, the 9-month trial made sense given the circumstances, and I didn't have an issue with it. Just would have liked to get a chance to find a new guild with more than 1 week before the next season, and I assume they agree they fucked up that part pretty badly. So this has led to a lot of discourse around this specific action, which I think almost everybody agrees is pretty shitty from the guild.
Actually, like
but also like trials in general, the practice of trialing raiders, whether a 9-month trial is a reasonable amount of time for a trial or not. Whether it even makes sense to have trials in this day and age. I think Echo does trials, right? But Liquid doesn't. So it's There are some guilds that don't do trials. I think most guilds do still do trials, but
yeah, majority, I think.
yeah, some will be like, okay, it's 4 weeks tops, right? And then you're in or you're out. My guild does trials. We do trials where like your trial can last. We it doesn't really matter how long it is, right? It's like a tier, right? We need to see you for a progression tier, not just so if we recruit you during farm, it's your trial is not going to be passed based on farm. It might be failed, but it won't be passed based on farm, which I think is reasonable as well. So when you talk about a 9-month trial, like the only way I could see a 9-month trial being fair is if you were like just on the edge between passing and failing in that one tier, or you like didn't play that tier for whatever reason, and it's not because we thought you sucked, it's just because like you were a druid one trick and it wasn't a druid tier or something like that, in which case I could maybe see extending the trial to another tier. But still, yeah, 9 months is a long time. I'm pretty sure we've done that like once in my guild's history to have a trial go that long. But
Well, so the circumstance was they were trialing during season 4, Fated season, which isn't, you know,
right.
really a season. So like you can't really gauge someone fully, and you can't really get a real trial going. So I mean, maybe it's like closer to 5 months, I want to say, of like an actual season trial.
Right, yeah, it's like he only did Ansarek prog. Like it's only so it is only one tier's prog is included in that 9 months, I guess.
Yeah, but I have a question. So, what exactly is the difference between a trial and a member? Like, what changes?
I think it depends highly on the guild. Like most guilds, they just treat trials exactly like normal raiders. Some guilds just go like, "Oh, you're a trial. Like, what are you saying to me?" Like, I think you're gonna get all in between. Like, it just depends.
Yeah, some guilds will do trial like threads where there's a thread that the person can't see that the other people can type about how that person's playing. You're trying to decide if they're good enough to play with you or not. Um, my guild does that, but I know a lot of guilds that do that. There's like a feeling that the threads just devolve into flaming the person, which is definitely like a pretty toxic, setup.
Yeah, I mean, like even like if you're a member, like would you not be judged just as much as a trial? I don't know. I find that to be kind of strange. I don't know. I feel like if you're just someone who like freshly joined versus compared to someone who like has been in the guild, surely that person who has been in the guild still has to play to that standard, right?
And I think that's a lot of like Liquid's argument for not having trials anymore. It's just like, yeah, everybody's always, if we recruit you, it's because we think you're good, and then everybody in the guild is constantly, you're on the chopping block at all times. If you suck, we're gonna kick you, right? And it doesn't matter whether you've been here for 1 tier or 10. But I do think it makes some sense, right? Like if you've got a new person, even just like the trial flag is kind of indicating, okay, everybody pay attention to this person, or like pay extra attention to how they're moving, how they're playing, right? So that you can then evaluate them kind of as a group, and then if they do well, you kind of move them into the raider rank where there's less scrutiny on them, right? You're not like actively scrutinizing them. You're kind of more passively checking, right? You're noticing that they've done something wrong rather than looking to see if they've done things well or not. I think it can make sense for that spot. Some guilds also do it for like, it used to be back in the day, trials get less gear. I don't think any serious guilds do that anymore. That's just stupid, right? No.
Yeah, I was gonna say it made more sense in the
guild does
past.
that.
Yeah, or like you might not get as many like consumables or whatever it may be, like because it made sense back in the days when there was like more to raiding outside of just like progression and getting it done. Like it was kind of just like an entire home, right? But
you might get smaller cuts as well, or no cuts potentially from sales, which I know some guilds do that to a greater or lesser extent. My guild does you don't get cuts if you didn't prog this tier with us, unless you're actually helping us kill the end boss. Like if we pick you up as a trial and then we added this tier because we picked up a bunch of trials and then they weren't obviously in on Ansarek, but then they were still getting these huge cuts from Ansarek sales that they weren't ever participating in. So we were like, okay, let's give them half cuts until people are actually killing Ansarek on Ansarek sales, which I didn't care too much either way. But I think it's fair-ish, right? Like,
I think cutting their cut completely wouldn't be fair, but I guess half is whatever,
I don't have a like again. This wasn't the people were complaining, so we decided.
This was 100% Dratnos' idea.
Yeah, I'm taking all those extra cuts. They're all mine.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
Hopefully, are you still a trial?
No, the way Echo does trials, I guess I can explain that. So basically, when you join, you're just a trial, and then the next tier, you're basically promoted or you failed your trial. So no longer a trial after the last year they promoted me.
I
And
see.
I think, I don't know, it feels weird because I know Liquid has no trial thing, but I think Echo does it just for like logistic reasons. Like, even though I was a trial, like I was in on almost every boss except Brew Twister. So it's not like they treat you any differently except for like just as like a title, you know?
Yeah, I think it can make some sense as kind of because it's kind of like this transition period where you're being initiated or assimilated into the guild like structure, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, I don't know. It is a weird because I do think it's a somewhat abused. There are some guilds that definitely abuse the trial position,
Mhm.
and that kind of gives it a bad name. And also this kind of so of course the big crime with the JB situation is that he got lobbed a month before or a week before a new tier, right? Like that.
Yeah, that's rough.
If you're a guild, you kind of I think 1 month before the tier, you got to decide if you're kicking anybody and do it then or forever hold your peace until next year because it's just or unless something happens obviously, right? But like presumably they decided they wanted to kick him and they just kept him around for farm to make farm easier or something like that.
I know some guilds go even further, and like if they're doing splits or something, they'll keep in trials just for the splits, like as split helpers, but they won't tell them stuff like
Yeah,
that.
which is super messed up. I've heard of that as well. I've heard of people getting kicked after week one after
Mm-hmm.
helping with splits, which is completely crazy. There's also guilds that will kind of like soft kick you, where they're never actually going to remove you, but you're never going to be in, and you're
Yep.
just there. You're there. Oh, you're helping with splits and stuff, but like, there's like a 1% chance you're actually going to see any progression, which is not actually inherently an unfair situation. The unfair part is that they don't tell the person that. You could tell people that though, and some people are okay with it. But yeah, that's a messed up thing that happens in guilds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, from my guild experience, I've noticed a lot of guilds do that.
Yeah,
Because I mean, maybe it's just like more of an NA thing, but players have a hard time telling other players like, "Oh, like we're not gonna have you in." So it's easier to just have them sitting in the bench the entire time until they eventually leave themselves.
yeah. It's crazy though because seeing this kind of uh made it clear like just how important it is. Like, this is like a full-time streamer, content creator guy, and whether or not he plays World of Warcraft this season is like predicated on this guild interaction, right? And I think it kind of underscores just how important for a lot of WoW players like a guild is to the game. And it reminds me that because there are people that's not true for, right? Like Dorki, for instance, you I think are somebody where if you got lobbed from your guild tomorrow, it would be like a logistical annoyance, but it wouldn't change the game really for you. But then there are a lot
Yeah,
of
but
people
I'm
where it's
free.
like that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, JB wasn't like this before, but I definitely noticed that like JB now just like doesn't care as much about M plus. I want to say, which kind of sucks. I mean, dude, I mean, oh 07 to JB, but he said he's gonna take a break from the game for an indefinite duration, and that really sucks because he's been such an iconic part of M plus forever. I mean, he was one of the first M plus streamers I've ever watched, and he's just been a big figure. It just sucks seeing him. I don't want to say quitting, but pretty much quitting.
Yeah, taking a break or for however long it ends up being. Yeah, '07 indeed. Uh, in lighter hearted news, something I've been seeing a lot also on X, the Everything app. A lot of people have been killing Zekvir on like question mark difficulty and celebrating it on there, which I think
I've
is
seen
sweet.
a couple of those.
Yeah, it's I was something where that reminded me a little bit of like the Mage Tower. I remember back when the Mage Tower was a thing, people would post that, and obviously like it would come in at different times, right? Like because Mage Tower was super hard at the start of when it first came out, and then it got easier over time. Zekvir sort of did. They nerfed it a lot, like a couple weeks in, but other than that, it's just been gear that's making it easier. But I think that's cool as well. That's made me excited for Delves to have some of that Mage Tower feel for it. Even if the ceiling difficulty that Zekvir landed at after they nerfed it is definitely a lot lower than Mage Tower, but it is still really cool to see. It's really cool to see people like being able to set themselves a solo challenge and then accomplish it and feel really proud about themselves. So yeah, congratulations to everybody who got that or who's still trying, good luck if you are. We can talk about what it's like going from like ID level guild, or going from we can talk about going from like a random guild to ID to Echo, like what that sort of vibe's been like.
I mean, I gotta talk about like my process and what I did.
Sure, yeah, okay. So I guess Frank will splice this in now. There's no way he'll have left in this entire awkward minute.
No way.
He would never do that to me.
I mean, we just started this very start because I guess it's not that long. Like, I just started playing in 8.3, played a Holy Paladin, and I think one Tuesday night I'm like, oh, I want to raid. I only like PvP'd before, and I joined a trade chat guild who were just raiding. They needed a fill, and I actually joined that guild. And I was playing there for like 3 or 4 months, just like, I don't know, get experience, just like build logs or whatever. And then after I was like, oh, I should probably get in a better guild. And then I joined a guild called the Syzygies, where I kind of stayed for like a couple months. It was my like first CE guild in the same tier. And then I played that tier with them, all the farm. And then I played most of Castle Nathria with them. I think we got stuck in the council and I got kind of not annoyed, but like we were on council for like over a month. They were like just like a 1K rank cutting edge guild. They got cutting edge every single patch, but I just wanted to do more. And then like from the difference between those two guilds wasn't much. The second one, it was kind of just like more committed. The first one was like just one 2 raid nights a week, like just casual, like you just do whatever outside of raid. The second one, it was more, there's people running M+ every day. There's people like actually talking about the raid fights while they're progging it. So there's like a tiny difference. And then I joined a guild called Idiot, which is around the world rank 300. And that's where it started getting like more intensive, not more intensive, but like just like exact same difference from the first to second guild. So like we would raid 3 nights a week, I think, for a couple hours, but there was a lot more prep outside. Like everyone's talking to each other. There's more of a community of like higher and higher keys run, just more topics talking. So it's just like another step up from that. And then I was in that guild for like a year or 2, and then I joined Instant Dollars.
How did you go about like jumping up these guild? Like, how did you go from get into Idiot and then get into ID? Like, what was did you?
Well, in fact, how did you even get into your first cutting edge guild? Because I feel like a lot of people always
go
ask,
from trade chat to a
how do
cutting
you
edge
even
guild.
get into?
Yeah,
one?
so from the trade chat guild, I knew like I watched a lot of videos of like how to climb guilds or whatever, how like what guilds look for.
Hell yeah.
And since I was healing, it was kind of weird, but like I knew not the best of the best guilds, but like the guilds I was moving into next cared a lot about healing Parses. So that's exactly what I did. I was like standing and stuff, healing myself, pulling a Dryny where I would just beacon myself and stand and everything. I watched them a lot to do that, and I like got a lot of tips from that. But so I just got like, I think all my Parses were like orange or something up to the first 5, and that's where they're progging still. And then I after the guild called Syzygies, and then they were a CE guild and they just needed a Holy Paladin at the time, so it was kind of lucky timing, and they just thought my logs looked good. And then it just the exact same thing. I just every single boss I would just try to parse as high as I can, just try to do as much healing as I can, because I knew guilds cared about that. And eventually I would stop caring about that because I know they don't actually matter. But for what I'm doing, I need to get to the next guild. It needs to matter for me.
Yeah.
So that's basically all I did until I joined Idiot. And then halfway through Idiot, you're kind of like established at that point. It was like world rank 200 or 300. And it's at that point, people don't really care too much about healing. I mean, they still care about healing Parses, but like not too much. But it was kind of easy because in Sanctum, I think, is when I swapped the Mage. And then it was the exact same thing as if I wanted to get into better guilds, DPS Parses mattered way more than healing Parses at that. So I just went for Parses, and just I made that my like whole personality kind of. I knew guilds only cared about that. If I could get rank 1 on Warcraft log, I could get in any guild I want.
Yeah.
And I mean that's basically what happened, except a couple of the Instant Dollars players were actually watching my stream while I was progressing Razageth and Idiot.
Uh-oh.
So they already knew, like they watched me play and they knew my Parses were good. So that's how I kind of got the trial in Instant Dollars, and that's how that happened. But I mean, if you're just still climbing guilds, it's still just Parses no matter what. If you parse really well, you'll get a trial in the guild. You just have to make sure you obviously don't like die or whatever in your trial and like perform bad, but Parses get you into the door really easily.
Yeah, it sucks. That's the culture because I mean, like, parsing shouldn't be what players are chasing after during progression, at least. But
Yeah.
that is the only way these guilds know how to
Yeah,
like
exactly. It's because okay,
determine
so
your
I thought
skill.
about this a lot. I think it's because up to a certain point, players can't do the rotation.
Mhm.
So the guilds look for players who can do the rotation as a base level because they know they can teach you to like, oh, don't die here, like don't play less greedy here. So they know you have the base fundamentals of like I can hit my buttons, and it's easier to teach how to play safe and like how to do mechanics in like a generic sense than how to exactly play your class. So I think it makes sense, but it definitely is a little weird.
I mean, a good
I feel
player
like it's usually
should be able to do a lot of damage, right? Like
Yep.
that's
yeah,
something
but I
where
mean at the same time, what makes it tricky is like oftentimes what I've noticed with parse players is either one, their ego is too big to like actually like if you
Mhm.
tell them not to do something right, they're gonna do it anyways. So you can't really necessarily teach these guys. And I feel like the second thing is they are often greedy and they're not like actually good like you, hopeful. Like you're trying to parse while not dying, but these guys are just parsing and they're just fucking dying.
I say that's also the second. Like if you get really good parses and you never die, you can basically go anywhere.
yeah, I mean that because that's you're obviously like an insane player if that's true.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I think it's if you're looking at somebody, if we're looking at somebody from a world rank 300 guild and they're not doing like massive damage, like what? How can that person be a player that will be a good player in a better guild, right? Like they're in a guild that's progressing more slowly, right? Because they're lower world rank or playing less hours per day, but they should be if they're in one of these guilds that's lower world rank, they're getting more pulls on these bosses. They're playing with worse players than them. Like, what are they going to be doing with all that extra time on each boss except for optimizing the hell out of doing a lot of damage, right? Like, I don't know. A good player should be able to do that, right? And like, obviously, a bad player can also do that sometimes, or like a player can do that and not have the capacity to also do jobs or mechanics or something like that. Like, but there's no way to filter for that, right? Like that's something that you've just got to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas you can at least know that they do good damage, and if somebody's doing great damage, like they're probably pretty good. It's probably if they are consistently doing great damage on mythic bosses, they're living those fights. Maybe their guild only kills bosses on the pulls where they don't int, and they int half the pulls. Like sometimes that happens, but it's at least more effective than nothing to look at, right? Like if you pop open somebody's Warcraft logs and it's a mythic and it's like all 95s or better, or and you pop up in somebody else's and it's like 43, 12, 73, 50, right? Like there's a very good chance that that 95s person is a better player, right? Like is it possible
Mm-hmm.
that the person with the low parses is just like carrying their raid mechanically or raid leading or something like that? Like yeah, it's possible, but on average the 95s person is going to be a lot better.
Yeah, funny story. So back in Legion, when I was just pugging keys, I was like a 4K IO boomkin, and some 5K IO Korean group invited me to their key. And like I was like surprised they actually invited me. Like that's a big IO difference. And like I ended up playing with these guys, and I did pretty well. So they ended up adding me, and they would like hit me up occasionally. They weren't like my main push group or anything. It was just like uh, I was like the pug guy that they would just occasionally invite to play with them. And so, like, it's like one random time after a couple sessions of playing with them, I'm like, so why did you guys even invite me in the first place? And then the Warlock was like, oh, yeah, like we looked up your logs and you had like a bunch of 99s or whatever. Like, that was the only reason why we invited you. I'm like, I mean, hey, it even works at M. Plus. Like, I'm out here with logs and that got me invited to higher IO groups. I don't think that really happens nowadays, but that was definitely a thing before. And it's funny, like, for the opposite too is also true. I've heard from some chatters who like talked about getting back into raiding for the first time in like I don't know since like Warlords of Draenor or whatever. And I'm like, how the hell do you just like get into a cutting edge guild? Because that's something people ask all the time for someone who has like not raided for such a long time. And he was like, oh, I just had a couple of titles or whatever, and that actually got him invited into a cutting edge guild. So like these accolades kind of just carry over.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think get just the advice of like, yeah, go for parses in these. I think it's weird because like people will give you there'll be people who don't like that advice, but I think it's actually that does make a lot of sense. Like what you did.
Because it's weird advice because you're telling them not to play how they should play in a raid fight just to get in like a better guild,
Yeah,
Yep.
and you know what? Honestly, like if you like, if you're in a guild and it's like, yeah, you see yourself as a mechanical player and you're doing low damage, like it actually is true that if you can do more damage and still live, you will be becoming a better player, right? Like there are people that are playing too conservatively and are, never taking any risks, and you will be a better player if you try and do more damage and also live, right? Like because you need to live to do a good parse.
Yes, just like finding a job. It's like when I was looking for a software engineering job at the time, the the advice that people always gave was to study lead code, right? And study like it's basically not it's like bullshit problems that like test your problem solving, but it's not what you actually
Mhm.
do in the workforce. So it's exactly this example. You're doing something that makes your logs look really good, but you're not actually like good at the job itself. And yeah, I mean, it's just such a shitty way to go about it, but it is what it is.
So how did you get into Echo from ID Hopeful?
Uh, I mean, I think at that point, once you go from a guild like Instant Dollars to one of the guilds like Liquid or Echo, it just has to be word of mouth. Like, as soon as we killed Fyrak, I got a DM from Echo basically asking like to just meet with me. I think if you're generally, I don't want to like say, if you're generally applying to guilds like that, it's not a good sign. But if they're reaching out to you, like you just have to wait for that kind of. I don't know. If you
Yeah.
really want like a pipeline, you have to go to one of the guilds that Echo or Liquid look at basically, because it's like the Instant Dollars, Vodka, Method, Fatrark. Yes, it's basically guilds that they're just gonna look at, for players. And then if you are good enough, I believe like it'll just spread through word of mouth, and you'll get your opportunity.
Yeah, I
I think
think
it
that
also helps
the
that you have a presence. Overall, it was like, I mean, at least when I first started playing keys with you, like it was just like I remember everyone's always talking about like, oh, it's like, this is my buddy Hopeful. He's a really good mage. And I'm like, oh yeah, we could play some keys with Hopeful. And then the first thing I see is you just fucking flame striking mobs to get your overall damage up.
Yep. Because also fun fact, like for parsing too, to get in better guilds, if you want more viewers on Twitch, you got to do more damage on the meters. So
Yep.
that's when I was also starting to like stream for the first time. So anything
okay.
to get my number on details higher, I was doing that. It was great.
Okay, yeah, and then you build up like a fan club, and the fan
Yeah,
club
and
is
then
your
I start
PR
playing
team
with
that gets
actual
you
like
into guilds.
actual M plus groups and actual guilds, and then I start being like, oh, maybe I'll pyroblast this mob once in a while. I'll swap a little
Yeah.
bit.
That's kind of genius, yeah. That's like just on a cynical level, like just yeah, pad really hard to get word like or to get invites into stuff and to like
Mm-hmm.
get a stream viewership, and then that works out. Yeah, I mean, hell yeah, makes sense.
It
I
was
do think
great.
there's
Yeah.
like doing Giga overall as well in M plus also is also a skill, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
again, obviously you want to be able to turn that off if you're pushing super high keys, but like there are people, all the best people can do that if they want to, right? Like that's something that uh you should be able to do. Yeah. Although I guess some people don't. Some people don't really think about like just padding with flame strike and sub key to do more overall.
That is actually something. Like when we're talking about raiders versus M plusers, one thing I've noticed is when you're in like raid, a lot of raiders are really good at doing single target and they know how to do all that. But when it comes to knowing how to like cleave down mobs or like how to just like AoE properly, for some reason it's just like it's not really there for raiders. You'll see this all the time. You'll see like on certain fights, the M pluser just does so much better at that, and then for the single target fights, the raider just like suddenly does so much better.
True. Uh, okay, I have another question for you, Hopeful. Then, what was the obviously like you did a tier of Race to World first, you won the MDI right after that, and then you decided that of the two, Race to World first is what you were going to continue doing. What was that experience like? Like, how did you make that call, and what was playing the Race World first like that's made you want to keep doing it?
I mean, it's just what I wanted to do in the game, basically. Like, I've always liked raiding over M+. I think when I first got on the M+, it was just something I could continuously do every day and stream it. It wasn't like I enjoyed doing it, but I definitely enjoyed raiding way more. And I think that just carried over to like now, like I still enjoy raiding more than M+, and if I have to pick one, I'd rather just pick raiding, you know? So it's only about enjoyment for me, basically.
That's kind of interesting. That's actually like a lot of the liquid players. I've noticed that like not a lot of the liquid players are interested in doing M+. Whereas like with Echo, it's usually the opposite. There's like a whole
Yeah, I
lot
know
more
for a
M+ers
while
over and
it was like 4 of the top 5 MDI teams had an Echo healer. That was something for a while. Yeah, that was interesting. Okay, we've got a Patreon question to go to next. This one comes from Tally that says, my best memories of MDI are from Ataldazar, Freehold, and Underrot, which, God, if you started in 8.3, this is like kind of before your time even.
No, I've done all of them.
These are
I guess they've all come back.
They've all come back.
Every single one of them.
With their big pulls giving high risk, high reward excitement, and it feels like we've moved away from that. It feels like there's little difference between TGP and MDI, as they are limited in the pulls they can do because the amount of cast or RP, etc. So my questions are, what makes a great MDI dungeon, and what makes a great TGP dungeon? Well, this is kind of perfect for you two, huh?
I think MDI pulls are still as crazy as they were back then. It's just you don't know how much goes into the MDI pull. Like, for example, for practice, you would do one pull for 8 hours, and like any little thing, like this one mob was 1 yard to the left, so everything changes, and you have to like plan for that. And like, it's still so dangerous for the MDI that you have to do nowadays. It's just most of it is just behind the scenes. You're not even going to see it. It's going to look so clean when you see it. You're like, oh, how could this ever go wrong? You know, but there's oftentimes dozens of ways a pull could go wrong throughout every single pack.
Yeah, I think what this person is mentioning more along the lines of an MDI is how you don't see any crazy tech. Like we might see hard executed pulls still, but you're not seeing stuff like snapping mobs or the stuff Echo did during their MDI with Black Rock Hold, summoning tech and the portals and Rise. I think that's what we're talking more about.
Mm-hmm.
I think another thing that like these dungeons have in common as well is like there would be a pull where it's just like 40% count all at once, right? Like Atalzar, Freehold, and Underrock kind of all had that, right? Where it's just like, oh, we're pulling all of Kragmaw's room, or like, oh, we're pulling everything onto the first bot, like in Freehold, everything onto the first boss, right? 34% count. Atalzar, right? You're going left and you're pulling all that trash, something like that, right? Like, which I do think MDI these days, usually like a big pull is probably like half that size. It's still as difficult, but it's smaller, right? Because like,
yeah, they keep on adding just tons of things to each pull, so like you can't just pull everything nowadays.
Yeah, which I do kind of empathize. Like I liked the massive pulls. I do think you're also right, Dorky, that like just like crazy tech, even something like squirrels getting taken out of workshop as well is kind of like they don't want you to be able to, you know, solo the dungeon if you execute some intricate thing properly, right? Something like that.
They also cut back a lot on tech during MDI. Like, if you have something that's like anything off like standard play, you have to send the exact video strat to the admins and like say exactly what you're doing. And 99% of the time they're just saying, no, you can't do this. But I think that's like part of the reason too.
Yeah, that's actually a much larger reason for it. Well, I mean, it's a combination of all of it, honestly.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, what makes a great MDI and great TGP dungeon, I think it's like the same thing. It's what makes a great dungeon in general, at least for me. Like, in my opinion, I just don't like the direction that these dungeons are going. But I can see their vision, and I see why exactly they're going for it. It's just to give a more standard type of experience across all players. Like right now, if you're someone who's doing a +5 key, you're probably experiencing a very similar dungeon to what a really high key player is experiencing. But I personally preferred it where there was more you could do. There was more freedom to how you played the dungeons at a higher level.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there have been some dungeons that have been better TGP dungeons versus like MDI dungeons. Maybe not. I guess this is the only season.
Like Dawnbreaker's a better TGP than MDI dungeon because there's like not much you could do.
Although I don't think it's necessarily a great TGP dungeon, just like not as bad as it is in MDI.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so maybe you're right, Dorki, that it's just a really fun push key will be a really fun TGP dungeon. Will it always be a really fun MDI dungeon? Because sometimes there's...
Well, do you mean like to play or to watch? Because I think those are super different.
That's true as well, yeah. I guess I'm kind of thinking about this in terms of like to play, but yeah, definitely to watch that's kind of more important for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, because like hopefully for you guys in the first MDI this season, you played without any affixes, right? Like, what is that whole experience like compared to?
Yeah, we played with affixes.
Yeah, with the Zalatat affixes.
Okay, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, you mean like no? Oh, I see.
Because the MDI was done at the level. It was done like I think it was 10s, 11s, and 12s. It was 9s, 10s, 11s, and 12s. Were the MDI?
9s were the
because your practice is really different, right, from usual.
Which is crazy because 10 was where Tyran or Fort got added, whichever wasn't on the key. So you had to practice 9s, which had only one of Tyran or Fort. And then you also had to do 10s and 11s, which had Tyran, Fort, Challenger's Peril, and a Zalatat's affix, right? And then you had to also practice 12s for the global finals, which was Guile instead, right? And no Zalatat affix. So that's actually kind of like still a lot of stuff. Probably still less bad than practicing.
Way less bad than practicing
Sanguine and stuff.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. But how is that?
Yeah, like I think as a player, I mean, I haven't played an MDI or TGP without affixes, so like I don't exactly know what it's like. But at least from what I've seen, it seems like you don't have to worry about different affixes as much, and you can kind of just like see what other people did during cups and do something very similar, and just like the practice is more routine, and you're kind of just doing the same shit. You're not having to really do anything too crazy or too different, I should say. Versus like before, you might have like a completely different set of affixes, and that'll like completely change the strategy you do in that dungeon.
Yeah, exactly. I think there are so many old affixes where just from affix to affix, you changed what you did in the dungeon way more than currently. Like currently, you basically know exactly what you're doing in the dungeon with like a certain affix, and like it doesn't really change much if you have like the dispel affix compared to like an orb soak affix. It's pretty similar compared to like back then. It could change drastically for each dungeon sometimes.
Yeah.
Interesting. Cool question. That one, Frank picked a good one for this week because obviously when the person submitted that, they didn't know they'd be getting hopeful to answer it.
Hateful.
Max would hateful. Yeah, that's his alter ego. Yeah, that's what Mandatory is going to see one day.
Well,
what do you guys think of the new dungeons coming next season? You guys, any that you're kind of hyped or worried about? I've been seeing a lot of trepidation around Cinderbrew Meadery. I don't know if you guys have done like PTR testing of any of them.
Google the word you just used.
Cinderbrew. Oh, trepidation.
Yeah.
vocab corner.
Okay, I got it. Go ahead.
Word of the day.
Yeah. A feeling of fear or agitation about something that may happen. Yeah, I don't know. So dungeons you guys are hyped or not about? Anybody got takes on Darkflame Cleft and Cinderbrew Meadery are the ones that I've been seeing a lot of.
I have a strong feeling they're trying really hard to make Cinderbrew likable by just like giving it the Shadow Moon Burial Ground treatment. Like it's basically going to be one of the easier dungeons, and
I've heard people say that about Darkflame as well.
No, yeah. So for Darkflame, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, for Darkflame, okay. Not for Cinderbrew.
Well, I'm not sure. Cinderbrew seems like it's still going to be moderately challenging, but yeah, I mean, Darkflame is the one that needs to be easy, right? Like if they don't, I mean, it's kind of the same of what happened to Dawnbreaker. Like Dawnbreaker was looking really rough, and then they just made it one of the easier dungeons, so people didn't end up hating Dawnbreaker.
I'm pretty excited for all the dungeons, to be honest. I think
same.
I think there's like season 1, it was kind of like, I don't think any dungeon like stood out or was bad necessarily, but I think season 2 there's like a couple of good dungeons, and I don't think there's a bad dungeon. I think a lot of people do complain about Dark Flame. I think they just don't like some of the gimmicks in the dungeon. I think some of the things are just annoying to deal with, but I think overall the dungeons I'm pretty like positive for. I think they're all looking pretty good.
Yeah, same. I mean, I said a lot of negative things about season 1 before season 1 came out, and I I fully expected season 1 to not be amazing with the dungeon set and how they went about these dungeons. But season 2, I'm pretty optimistic about. It seems nice, and I mean, like, even amongst some of my friends who are more doomer, like Evade, like Evade is usually critical about World of Warcraft, and even he thinks that season 2 was looking good, and yeah, I feel exactly the same.
Hell yeah. I'm also pretty optimistic about it. I think it looks like a lot of good changes. The balance, like, again, if Og's dead, I'm hyped. I'm not even dead, but like if I can just play without it and not feel like I'm griefing, I'm hyped. Tank balance looks better. Like this season's tank balance got so bad and got like, it's weird because, okay, I guess when we talk about class balance for an M+ season, it feels like it kind of doesn't even matter what happens in the 0.0 patch anymore, because the M+ season's always like what they do in the 0.5 patch, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I think it still matters because, like, if you're playing for like the first few months, you want the balance to feel relatively close. I also feel that way with the balance season 2. I don't know how they did it, but it seems like everything is much closer, especially with the most recent patch. I do still hate the idea of tanks and healers not feeling OP. Like, I swear they need to make tanks and healers OP just for once. Like, please just make them good for once.
Just for once, please. We've never gotten to be OP before. We're just small tanks. We don't.
I've been seeing some tanks do a lot of damage on PTR recently.
Nah, that's crazy talk.
I think they're getting close to being OP. I've gone out damaged some pulls by a tank.
They're probably just abusing some PTR stuff, like they're wearing some old trinkets or something that are getting scaled up, and it's probably not realistic. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, like I just want to see tanks and healers pop off and feel good.
Yeah, me too.
I don't know how you make healers like feel good though. For a tank, it's easy. You just make them do more damage and like be able to pull more. But like healers, you're kind of limited to like how much damage it does. Like, who cares if you're a healer like doing damage when you're doing like 1/10 of the damage a DPS or a tank does?
No, I don't think that's true. I mean, like, if you're hitting your healing buttons and like you're actually feeling the power of each of your healing buttons topping someone, I think that's like a huge part to healing.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
Yeah, like when I'm on my Resto Druid, for example, and if I like have my ramp going, I want to see their HP bars just like shoot up. I don't want to just be like, I see it trickling up slowly and just having to spam regrowths to keep people top. Like, I just want my hots to pop the hell off.
Yeah, it's weird because like that leads to unhealthy places for healers. If you get to a spot where it's like any one global tops everybody, and like then like healing doesn't really matter anymore, or like being a good healer, because they've kept making these changes where it's like, okay,
yeah, but it's fun,
increase the size of health bars so that healing feels more like something, right? You see like the Yoon's healer videos where it's like, okay, look back at Sludge Fist, and the thing about the way that old healing used to work is that you didn't just get to top somebody in one global, right? And like you had to actually like plan it out, but also somebody wasn't going to die, right? Like if you left them at 60% HP for 10 seconds, they weren't just dead. Whereas nowadays, if you ever do that, they're turbo dead, right?
Yeah, I think it was kind of what Dorki was saying. Like, you run into the problem where you want to make healing more fun, and that's how you make healing more fun, but HP bar, like, slingshotting back and forth isn't, like, healthy for the game, So you have to, yeah. I think if they find, like, a balance of it, it'll be good, but I think one way in either direction is pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean, healers can never be satisfied, so we don't even have to worry about them, honestly. Like, whatever you do, one healer will be upset. It's like, oh, healers have to do damage? That sucks. Healers don't get to do damage? That sucks. Oh, healing is too easy? That sucks. Well, healing's too hard now. Oh, that also sucks.
Yeah, if I play bad, my group dies. That sucks. Oh, how I play doesn't matter, so they've replaced me with a prop paladin. That also sucks. Healers, they can't be. They're never satisfied, man.
That's why Morgan Day was right. Like Morgan Day, he understood it. He saw the vision. He wanted healers deleted. I hope they happen to fulfill Morgan Day's wishes.
Based.
Oh, speaking of which, have you guys seen the Fellowship game? Have you guys like played it at all? Or
I played it during like one of the like 6 months ago or something. It's kind of weird because both the times they've had these playtests, it's been like awkward times for WoW. Because the last time it was like right before War Within came out, and now they're doing one and it's like right before the new season comes out. So I'm already like, I've skipped this new PoE event as well that also looked super sick and I wanted to play. But I've heard it's shaping up really nicely. So for anybody who doesn't know Fellowship, it's like it's basically like M+ only game. It's like there's not really the MMO components. It's literally just like queue up, do M+, over and over again with like classes that are specifically designed for M+, and mob mechanics that kind of like scale up with the key level, because it has like key levels as well, and you can kind of choose which affixes go on the keys. I don't know, it seems super sick. It seems really cool.
Yeah, I heard there's a playtest on the 24th. So
yeah,
I see. I might check it out. I'm not sure. It's kind of timing tight because it's like right before the patch comes out.
Yeah,
but I might check it out. I saw Tettles was streaming it. He was actually playing with Pete and Squishy and the bench squad. Those losers over there. But it looked.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, we don't like those guys. They are terrible, terrible podcasts. I don't even know how anyone watches them. But
I've never.
Yeah, that's good. So I was watching their stream, I never did a podcast, and it seemed interesting. Like some of the bosses were pretty cool. There's like some really interesting mechanics. HP bars are also moving really slow in that game. I wonder how Pete feels about healing in that game. I'm actually very curious to hear what he thinks.
Interesting. Yeah, have you seen it at all, Hopeful? Any?
No, I haven't. I'm watching videos of it right now.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, you haven't seen it? You literally didn't even know about it.
I've seen some, like, it's kind of, to me, I don't think I would play it too much, because I think I actually do like the MMO stuff around M+. But I think there are a lot of people that don't, and that this is going to be super sick for if they just want, all the dungeons and none of the grind.
It's one of those games that would be fun to mess around with. Have you guys played Battle Royale before? I don't know if you guys have
That's
played
the MOBA Battle Royale.
I remember playing it a while ago. Yeah, like 6 years ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was a while ago.
Okay, this is different. I was thinking of different one.
It's like an arena game, kind of.
I see.
Yeah, it's like literally World of Warcraft arenas, except you're playing like League of Legends.
Yeah, I played it for like a week.
Yeah, I actually played the hell out of that game, and it was like super fun, but it's not something that has longevity, and it just doesn't have a player base. And I'm imagining the same will happen to Fellowship, which sucks. I mean, like, these games are really fun. It's just you can't really maintain a player base. You can't really keep up with content, especially if it's a M+. Like M+ has to be developing new dungeons every so often. So I don't know. We'll see where it goes from here. I hope it does well, but I also have no idea what to expect. And there's no way I would ever play this over World of Warcraft because of the MMO aspects.
How are you enjoying being a mage one trick, Hopeful? Is that
Oh, it's great.
You glad you swapped off healer?
Yeah, I think that was also like a big thing when I was swapping off healer, because I didn't want to be in a position where if my tuning of my class was bad, I just wasn't going to play. Like, it didn't matter how good I was at all. It's just, if my class wasn't tuned well, I just wouldn't play in like a good guild if I ever got to one.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like specifically one I was looking at. So I think like I just picked all the raid buff classes basically, and then narrowed it down to a couple where like I'd be like, okay, I could play this, I narrowed it down to I was like warrior, mage, lock, and I think mage was just the most fun out of all of them, and I'm so glad I picked mage. I think just being a mage is great. Mage has been broken for 20 years.
Yeah, must be nice. Actually, wait, hold on. I have a really important question for you, Hopeful.
Go ahead.
So you said you PvP'd in this game, right? Were you mostly PvPing before getting into raiding an M+?
Yeah. So okay, I played for a year in MOP, and I only did RBGs. I was like a little 12, 13-year-old kid. And I hit Hero of the Alliance, rank 1, no big deal. And then I quit because then I started playing League of Legends, which was the better
What about
game.
arenas?
No, I didn't do arena at all. I only liked RPGs.
No? Oh, that's
no.
crazy.
It was weird because I was playing with like rank 1 PvPers, and they would always ask me to do threes later. I'm like, I'd rather do RPGs, you know? So I think that actually contributed to why I I transitioned in rating, because RPGing is like not, it's like half PvP, half rating kind of, but yeah.
Yeah.
But I think I just, go ahead.
So you also, so in League of Legends, you also hit Challenger, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I saw Tyler One talking about like, wow, this guy's actually pretty good, because I did see you guys were playing League of Legends together in that.
Yeah,
thing.
I kind of snuck into that. I didn't even play OnlyFans for like a month, and then I got a ping in the Discord. They're like, "Oh, need like 2 more for OnlyFans in house. You guys want to play?" And I was like, "Sure, I'll play." That was a fun little.
The question is League of Legends PvP harder than World of Warcraft?
Oh, way harder. Like, it's it's way harder than raiding or like PvE, especially. But I think it is still harder than PvP by a lot. Like, I think there's just let alone like a lot of people just compare the game alone. Like, sure, you can have like what you think is harder in the game. I think League is still harder game wise, but I think sheer player base size is what makes League way harder than WoW. It's like, if you're top 1% of a game with, I don't know, 100,000 players, it's way different than top 1% of a game with like 10 million players, you know? It's just the sheer sample size just makes people better at that 1% level, you know? And I think that's like the biggest factor in why I think League is harder than WoW.
Okay. Yeah, I was asking this question because there was a pretty hot topic between Peekaboo, Zaryu, and Tyler One, where they're like talking about the difficulty of World of Warcraft, and somehow they managed to gaslight Tyler One into thinking that World of Warcraft PvP is like the hardest shit ever, and he'll never be able to get into it, and saying how like League of Legends is just like way easier.
Yeah.
So
I can't really.
But you're the only
on...
one that actually have like some like you actually can't really speak up
because RPGs isn't really the same. I did like in-house RPGs like ABN Balamos, so it was kind of like the highest end of RPG, like PvP RPG you can, but it's still not the same as Arena. But like, I like to think I have like a good idea of what Arena is, because I still did Arena sometimes with them, like some RPG players just like for fun, you know. But I never like did anything serious, so I kind of understand what it takes to be like good at PvP. But I think just the sheer amount of sample size of League makes it harder. But I personally think like the game, like comparing League to WoW, League is harder. Like no player base either.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you took 10 super sick gamers, or I guess 20, you took super sick gamers from like another game and you told them like, okay, you guys have got to get super good at WoW or super good at League, like which would take them longer? I think that maybe WoW would take like longer just because it's got more like built up long-term knowledge. I think it would still be League though. I think League would take longer to like.
I think League would take longer.
If the goal was 100%.
Like, okay,
get either, I guess going from like 0 to a cutting edge guild versus like 0 to what, Master in League or something, or Grandmaster.
Basically be like
that's pretty.
Okay, but like, so basically like if Peekaboo were to get Challenger versus Tyler One getting rank 1 in arenas, what
I think both of those
more feasible.
Huh.
I think comparing one player in each game is kind of bad, because like people have their own strengths and weaknesses. It's more if you put 100 challengers in the WoW, what percentage of them would get rank 1 PvP? And you put 100 rank 1 PvPers, what percentage of them would get Challenger? And I think it
would be a pretty high percent of both.
I think it would be a high percent of both, but I think League players would get a higher percentage of rank 1 in PvP.
I think that's fair. Yeah. Again, with the caveat that like maybe there's some long-term knowledge stuff. WoW is one of those games where like there's not a lot of players that have started more recently that have gotten into high-end WoW. You and like JPC are kind of the exceptions in my mind of people that
I'll say
started.
there's a bunch, right? Like Tobo, maybe
Tobo, I guess,
Boomy too, right? I'm not sure.
But it's more of we're the exception, not like what's standard.
Yeah, like most
90%
high-end
of the
WoW
people.
players are.
Oh, you guys are built this, yeah.
WoW players, right? Like, it's
yeah.
Whereas I guess League, that's kind of becoming true for as well. Not a lot of Zoomers are dominating League. Yeah,
but there are a couple like new names every now. I think way more than WoW. Like WoW, you have a couple people each season, but League, there's like every single team I think has someone new.
But maybe the success of you, JPC, and Tobo kind of goes to show, like, okay, it wouldn't actually take a committed person that long to master this game. There just aren't a lot of them coming in. So maybe if you did take 100 challengers and you threw them in and you forced them to, like, they could become super sick really fast. Yeah,
it is interesting because we do see actually a lot of League of Legends players who are playing WoW now. Like I know,
but a lot of them are doing it more like
casual.
Well, okay, not
more casual. Yeah. This is a very chill game. It's not very
right, exactly.
Sweat game.
Huh. All right. On that interesting note, I think that's going to be it for this week's episode. Hopeful, where can people find you? Anything you want to promote before we?
I mean, you just follow me on Twitch at Hopefulx. My Twitter, I think, is HopefulQT. That's about it.
Yeah, right, I've heard you can also usually find Hopeful over at Asian Bunny X. He's a frequent of that stream.
He's just playing old VODs now, and it's not that exciting anymore.
You already know.
It's like a free cash hack, by the way. If you guys want, just play old VODs and just put live in the title, you'll get a couple hundred viewers, and you can just farm ad revenue. It's crazy.
I mean, you could only do it for so long.
She has been doing it for like a month. Not that I would know exactly how long, but.
Yeah, anyways, thanks for coming on, Hopeful.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah,
thanks for having me.
All right. Bye, everybody.